Good evening. It's 6 o'clock and we have a quorum and I'm Rick Marshall. I'm the Vice Chair of the Traffic Safety Commission, and you get me tonight because our chair has called in sick. And so I'm only my second meeting on the committee. I find myself in charge. So I appreciate in advance any assistance you can all give as I do my best to get us through this together. So, Fatine, will you call the roll, please?
Michael Rosman.
Here.
Chase Kyle.
Here.
Greg Steffler. Greg. Absent. Brian Torres.
Here.
Gabrielle Hamel.
Here.
Roger Coleman.
Here.
Rick Marshall.
Here.
Mike McBride.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks you, everybody. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is public comment. I know there's one specific thing. There's a person who registered to address this on an item later on the agenda, but we're going to bring it up now. And I'm hoping Brett will walk everybody through this, please.
The fund we want to promote. Speaker. Just ask him to speak on first public comment.
Will you set this up to what you told me earlier?
Yeah, I understand that the speaker is here to talk about the North Main, Illinois project study, intersection study that shows up on the agenda under the engineering report as a work item there. So that project is being canceled on that. So that's what we're just looking to have. That's what the announcement will be for that piece of it. That's what the comment is about. So we're just going to allow the speaker to give his public comment at this point in time, rather than waiting until that part of it.
Okay, very good. And so, caller, you're on the air.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. This is Russell Johnson, and I'm a resident of Newburgh. I live just down the street from that intersection of Illinois and North Main. And so seeing that the construction project has been canceled, but that additional safety ideas are being considered, I was curious as to whether there would be public input into that. If there was an idea of an ad hoc committee. Can anyone?
City manager is here and can speak to that.
Hi, folks. Forgive me if you've never heard a Glasgow accent before. It's the only one I've got, so I'll try to muddle through. So the reality of our current situation is that we are very low on transportation / road funds, and there's no way to address that. So the planned spending for design work to reconfigure that's simply not an option at this time. It does not mean, however, that we're not going to do something in that area to deal with that three-way look, as I call it. So the problem being that somebody coming up to the Oregon Road has to look behind them over their left shoulder as well as left and right on a hairpin turn. That's exactly what the problem is. So although the ad hoc committee is not going to happen, it does not mean that nothing is going to happen. What we're going to do is, following a suggestion that was floated by Mayor Ruzacker, we're going to talk to the people who live on that street exactly there and see what other possible calming measures might be useful for Illinois itself and talk to the people that live in that specific small section. Forgive me, I'm not an engineer and I don't play one on television. What is it, 100 yards or something that leads up to that three-way spot. Some ideas that have been floated are perhaps fire lane and fire traffic allowing, that street might be dead-ended so that the people who live in that, what would become a cul-de-sac, would then have to take an additional right-hand turn to go back towards the Oregon route. If that is possible, we are going to look at that. But summary, don't have the funds right now, but it's not like we're not going to do nothing at all. And we are going to be talking to that neighborhood about some other ideas that cost less money.
Right. Yeah, I live in that neighborhood, so that's why I'm concerned about the intersection. I use it every day. And there's some simple things that could be added, such as a sign that says, do not block the intersection, so that people do not cross from Illinois into the intersection, having two vehicles, sometimes with a trailer, where they come into the intersection and block North Main.
That's a very good
s-
point, sir. And
Simple things like that would help a lot. Only allowing one vehicle at a time into that intersection would make it safer. So there's some signage might in the meantime, but these are the kind of things that we'd like to talk about before there's any, reconfiguration that we obviously can't do because we don't have the money. But a few signs might help.
And that's the kind of lower cost thing that we're thinking about. Now I understand you've given public comment. Do we have this gentleman's email address captured? Awesome. Okay, so I've got your email address and I will be reaching out to you directly.
Excellent.
To get some more feedback. And you're certainly one of the people that we're going to be talking to when we tour that section to look at some other options. But no, we don't have a couple of $1 million sloshing around for that.
Right. Yeah, we understand. Yeah, I think there's some things we could try to at least keep the intersection clear, and try and prevent people from jumping into it while there's all this cars moving from 3 different directions or 4 different directions.
Absolutely. That's exactly what the problem is.
Yeah. I just kind of know because I had signed up for the ad hoc committee, and with that being canceled, I want to be sure that we still have some neighborhood impact input into some things and come up with some new ideas. So
Yes, sir.
appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment, and we're sorry that Elliott Road went so much over budget.
It's okay. It's all right. It was a great job, whatever you did there. So I'm sure everyone appreciates that new road there on Elliott.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. We appreciate your public comment. Michael had a point.
Yeah, just a question, Will. First of all, thank you for being here, being willing to speak up. What time frame are you thinking of interviewing the neighbors? And then by when would you hope to have some simple mediations in place? Just so we could kind of capture that for.
So my thinking really is based upon, first of all, my bandwidth, which is incredibly thin right now. So I am involved in some internal restructuring work that I'm doing. I'm also involved in the budget committee meetings, which are happening right now. And unfortunately, and this is personal, maybe I shouldn't say this, I'm trying to finish my master's degree. So that's all going on. I would say June is very likely. When we get to June, my capacity will flourish again. So that would begin with visiting with some people in that neighborhood to see what their ideas are, and also obviously talking to our friends from ODOT about other ideas that they might have.
Okay.
And for implementation, do you have in mind a target for this? Is this by the end of the year? Is this at 2024?
For the small dollar amounts I have in my brain right now, definitely before the end of this year. Because it's not big lift projects. is we can't do any big lift streets projects right now.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Now, as I was learning the rules of our local agency here, anybody who wanted to have addressed the commission during public comment would have had to sign up, and Russell Johnson was the only one. So thank you, Russell. So therefore, I already know we have no other public comment, and I'm prepared to move on. So far, okay, nodding heads around the table. Next up is our consent calendar, the minutes of our January meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review them?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Okay, a motion by Brandon and a second.
I'll second.
Roger, okay.
Comment?
Comment, yes.
So under old business, item 1, where we went through future tasks and we merged and deleted and all, had a very productive little session there. Thank you all. Just kind of wondering if we could actually get, okay, so what's a revised list look like? Because I can't quite connect the dots looking through this to
I
see
think-
what.
I think that's what turns out to be one of our agenda items tonight, is to do exactly that.
Thank you. So please move on with the point.
Okay. Any other comments? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Cruising right along. Okay, next is our presentation from ODOT. We have Jenna. Why don't you come up to the table, use the microphone and tell us your full name and launch.
Jenna Berman. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Jenna Berman, I'm with ODOT, and my title is Active Transportation Liaison, which is the fancy way to say I do all things bicycle and pedestrian and scooter and micro mobility. That's what we say now. Thank you for all those little devices. And I cover an area of ODOT that has about 100 communities in it. So there's a lot going on. But one of the things that I guess I can't remember how much time I have. What have I got? 20, 30 minutes? Yeah, ish. Great. Because I really want to talk to you guys. So the timing of this was really great. There's kind of a unique opportunity for Newburgh here. There is an ADA project coming that will be addressing all of the ramps on the state system, and you guys have a lot of state system in your town. And when that project comes through, there is kind of a rare opportunity to jump onto it with some additional funding to try and get some other things done. And just like you were talking about with the inquiry that we just got from the community, transportation funding is very short these days. There's just a lot of shortages. The gas tax is not meeting. There's this inverse relationship map that is out there. P.S. We've known this was coming for the last 20 years, but we're still, here we are. The gas tax is bringing in less and less money. We're very reliant on the gas tax for transportation infrastructure, and therefore our infrastructure needs are not being met. And one of the challenges there is that ODOT used to have funding programs that did sort of all the things. They'd come through and redo a road and do pavement, and then also do crossings and striping and sidewalk infill and kind of all the bells and whistles. It was called the modernization program, right? Well, we don't have any funding like that anymore. And so what we have are these very siloed programs. So you have a pavement program over here, you have an ADA ramp program over here, and it's very like maintenance oriented. And so then here I come along with all my fun ideas, you know, of improving things for people getting around, not in cars. And so the way that I am going about trying to accomplish that is by jumping on to those other projects and adding pieces here and there where it makes the most sense. So you all might be familiar with our planning process. We have, the city of Newburgh has a transportation system plan. What year is it, do you know? Adopted? 2017?
2017 with
Okay.
an update for the riverfront master plan area in 2021.
Okay, Yeah, so all cities in Oregon over 5,000 or whatever do one of these transportation system plans, and they're very comprehensive and they're great, and they talk about all the modes of transportation, and you end up with these big project lists, and then a lot of it doesn't get funded, you know? But you've done the process where you're ready for the funding, and so that's important. But a lot of times what happens is the ideas in the transportation system plan are pretty general in nature. I think I'm actually just giving my presentation without doing it. So the transportation system plans of those TSPs are very general in nature and they're not very specific. And so then a project comes along and I go, wait. I want to do things for pedestrians and add crossings and add bike lane striping and improve it. And they go, well, but what does it exactly look like? What's that striping look like? How much room do we have in the roadway width? Do we even have room for that crossing? So a TSP doesn't go down and like look at your cross section specifically and say, gosh, you know, this one of these travel lanes for cars is like 13 feet wide. And then this is parking lane that's like 9 or 10 feet. We could take 2 feet from that. We could take 3 feet from there, you know, and figure out the cross section. Right? That doesn't happen, that level of detail. And so there's this big gap at our agency, I think, between our long-range planning, our dreams for 20 years of transportation funding, and our project delivery, which is where some money actually gets, you know, on the ground over here for something to happen. And then you don't always have the time to figure out, you know, where those two might come together. So I've started a couple of us at the agency started this new process. We call them urban design verification studies. And what we did was we looked at where projects were coming when we knew like ADA was going to be coming. And then we overlaid that with some socioeconomic data and things like we have around equity. We have equity data for the state that kind of looks at, because we know that people that are lower income disproportionately are biking, walking, and taking transit more, right? And so, and they're also getting hit and killed more by cars. And so we have a lot of that data. And then we have crash data, and then we have risk data, 5-lane section, 99 shows up pretty high for you guys because it's 5 lanes wide and it's all the way across, and right, so that's a high pedestrian risk corridor, right? So we looked at all this data and we honed it on Newburgh as one of the places to do this study, because all of those things kind of aligned. Now, unfortunately, I don't have all the money to do all the things, right? But I have some money, a couple million, maybe 3 or 4 million-ish, to do some things. And so I'm bringing our early ideas to you guys tonight, in the hopes of getting some feedback. So that's sort of the why. I don't know where to point. Where am I pointing? Do you want to just make it go? That'd be great. And I can just tell you when to flip. That'd be great. So that's what an urban design verification study is. That's why we're doing it here in Newburgh, because those stars, that opportunity kind of aligned. So what I'm really bringing to you today, because this was the immediate funding opportunity, is some crossing concepts that I wanted to get your feedback on. And then after we figure that out, we're going to also continue our work here, and we're going to be looking at a roadway reconfiguration. Some people call it a road diet. We try not to call it a road diet anymore because most people don't like diets, and we want people to be excited about these things. But a road diet's been talked about in Newburgh for a long time, because you have this really unique opportunity as well. Another reason why we wanted to do this work here now is because of the bypass being built, and therefore some of that truck pressure through the downtown coming off of the downtown, and it really kind of provides this unique opportunity because we don't build bypasses anymore, right? So you guys are like it for a long time. But it's this unique opportunity to kind of re-envision that downtown and maybe think about prioritizing things, not trucks. So we're going to be coming back to you and asking for some feedback on different ways it could be restriped. right? But today is the crossing thing, because that's the thing that we have to figure out sooner rather than later. So, so this is our study area, and so we're doing the couplet downtown, and then this segment of Highway 219 or East First Street on the east end of town. And I've also heard from a lot of the community about Everest and First, and so that east end. So we're definitely going to talk about that tonight. So just to be real clear, the couplet's already got your downtown couplet, that two-way highway actually has some really great stuff already. You've got these curb extensions already, which are really nice. You've got parking downtown, which isn't always great for people cycling, but it adds to that kind of pedestrian environment. People want to pull over, or they want to park, you know, kind of narrows the lane down. So there's already some good stuff in place, but I do hope to add more when we reconfigure the roadway. 3 lanes of traffic is a lot to be going through a downtown like that, in a place where you really want people to be stopping and walking around and spending money and walk into the cultural center and stuff like that. So there's a lot of couplets in our region, Philomath, you know, with a lot of traffic on them. And I don't know about other 3-way ones. This is 3-lane. This is a biggie. So I'm really excited about kind of allocating some of that space, but we'll get to that later. So, so this study that we're doing right now, looking for low-hanging fruit, pedestrian and bicycle solutions that can be leveraged onto the project. I explained all of that, you know, making sure that we do enough outreach, even though this is kind of an internal guiding document for ODOT. It's not an adopted plan like a transportation system plan is, but it aligns with your transportation system plan, and it's getting more specific. And so we just need to make sure that we get enough public support, and we got a lot of comments. I told them I'm doing one of these in Cottage Grove right now too, so not to make Cottage Grove look bad, but I have 115 comments, I think, from Newburgh and 14 from Cottage Grove so far. So kudos to your community for being engaged. It's really incredible when that happens. And for the most part, I think we're on the right track from what I've seen so far for those comments. So, so I think I already said all this because I get excited and I want to start talking about things, but the ADA project is coming. These are higher equity corridors. If anyone wants to ask me what's considered in that equity data, I can give you the general 3 to 5 million-ish that we could put toward this area. And we've got a timeline because the ADA projects are coming fast and furious. So after I hear from you guys tonight and talk to the city a little bit more. I got some initial feedback from the city engineers and finish looking through those comments. I'm pretty much gonna finalize those concepts and pass them on to the design team. So let's see what's next. Let's see what next. Okay, great, good. So we're to the crossing. So go ahead. Let's go to the this is kind of what I wanted to get from you guys. Are we in the right place? Do you know where people are wanting to go today? This is mostly looking at OR 219 or East First Street. And then kind of how does that reconcile with the essential turning movements? Because there's always trade-offs. I just want to tell you that when we have these conversations, something's got to give. So at some point, to increase pedestrian safety, a lot of times it might limit a turning movement or make a turning movement a little less convenient. But, you know, we know that people in cars are protected. We know that pedestrians are vulnerable roadway users. So the conversation's changed a lot over the last years, especially the fact that I even have a job at a state DOT tells you something, right? We really are moving in a different direction and trying to accommodate all roadway users. It is public right of way, not car right of way after all. Okay, so let's get into the concepts. That was a little bit of a soapbox from me. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you. So, okay, so I want you to picture driving eastbound on OR 99 and or heading away from downtown. And there is this big wide, feels like an off-ramp, you know, right onto East First Street, and the speeds that people are coming off of the highway at and into a neighborhood for all intents and purposes are challenging. So our preliminary idea Our concept for this is to slow down the turning vehicles by adding curb extensions, bulb outs. There's a lot of words for these, but that's kind of that green space. So that the vehicles that are turning right are gonna actually have to slow down to make that right-hand turn, which they already will have to do if they're turning into the Circle K, which is right up the road, or if they're turning into the grocery outlet. So it wouldn't be that weird for a car in the right lane there to be slowing down to make a turn. Some green skip stripes there for the cyclist, if the cyclist is continuing eastbound, so it brings some more attention to the fact that there's a cyclist on your right that has the right of way actually, that might keep going. Yeah,
I have a question.
yeah.
Do those work?
They do, yes, they do. And one of the reasons why I think they work is because we don't put it everywhere. You know, we use it pretty sparingly and we put it in places where there's high conflict points, right? Lots of vehicles turning over what might be. You could argue in this spot that there might not be high volumes of cyclists, because I think that most cyclists would not want to be riding on the highway. So this is a questionable spot to use it. So, I mean, it's a good point. But it does show to just bring attention to the fact that cyclists can be there. Obviously, it's not a vertical thing. It doesn't protect them physically, but it brings attention. And so anyway, so in general, this is the concept for the beginning of East First. And I might go through them, or do you guys want to kind of talk about them as we go? What makes sense? I know you probably don't always have conversations like this, but I know it's a little different.
Do
but-
you have, how many different?
I have four.
site-
I
okay.
have four.
Why don't we
Yeah.
just do each one at a
Yeah,
time?
I think that sounds great. That was a great question, is like, you know, do we need green? And one of the questions about the green that brings up is, the city would maybe need to maintain it. So that's a good point, is whether or not the city would be willing to maintain the green. So, the city needs to think about that.
I've walked up there many times and also ridden my bike through there. And I think one of the things I've seen a lot of pedestrians do is they look at like, I want to go that way straight.
Yeah,
And there's no crosswalk. There's no indication I'm allowed to be a pedestrian walking here, but screw it. I'm going to go anyway because there's a sidewalk right there. And I know that that's where I want to go. I don't want to go that way when I know ultimately I want to go that way.
yes,
So
totally.
I don't know if anything could be put in there to discourage any pedestrians from walking across. on the
Yeah,
road.
you know what? That's really interesting because that looks terrifying to me. I don't want to cross there when I'm standing there, but you're right. If they're going to the Circle K, that's probably the most direct route, and pedestrians are like water. They want to go that most direct route, right? So do you think, so by adding those green curb extensions, we will be shortening that crossing distance. So the pedestrians would be, if they insist on going that way, they're going to be out there in the roadway for less time, right? So they won't be vulnerable for as long. But today, there's not ramps there today. There's not ADA ramps there today. So we don't actually have to put ramps there. So it's actually, is that a legal crossing then, if there's not ramps? That might not be a legal crossing. Do you know, Brett?
My understanding is whether there's ramps or not, in the state of Oregon, there's a legal crossing.
Intersection is a legal
Every
crossing.
intersection,
Every intersection is a
unless it's
legal
closed.
crossing. I should know that, yeah. Right, yeah, yes. So anyway, so hopefully they'd be vulnerable for a lot less longer. They may still choose to cross there, but that would help with their safety. But I don't think we would stripe it because we don't have ramps there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think by making that sidewalk continue to the right and straight and not giving the impression that you can just kind of go to the left, I think that will help. And if the farther away that sidewalk is on the other
Yes.
side to this one, the less likely someone will be like, yeah, I'll risk it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and there'll be a new crossing down at Church, or, you know, maybe a little more attention grabbing crossing, so maybe more people will choose to go that way. I'm glad to know though that, I mean, that's validating what you're saying, is that people still are choosing to cross there, and if nothing else, we're gonna shorten that vulnerable part of their crossing in the roadway. So I appreciate knowing that.
Brandon?
Yeah, Brandon.
Thank you, Jenna, for being here tonight. I did have one question. So I've worked in a city in the past, similar size, where we actually had red light cameras.
Yeah,
And one of the concerns that came out of after the red light cameras were installed, especially since we're gonna have one over here at Villa, is the traffic on the non-major thoroughfares tend to see an increase. Has that been thought about in the design specs that some traffic may be put on to 219 because of the red light camera and what that can kind of do to that entry path?
Well, I don't think we have any red light cameras proposed. Were you thinking there was a camera here? I like the idea of red light cameras, but.
I'll speak, there's one proposed at 99 in Villa being coordinated.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. That's a separate thing.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And I was just wanting to see if there was any type of data that you had that were to, if we start looking at shifting away the traffic patterns, if the red light is going to increase some of the additional traffic coming
On to
behind.
219.
Yeah,
Oh,
behind
wow.
Circle K through Everest.
I haven't looked at that, but it makes me feel all the more justified in doing this work, because if you get more traffic on 219, then this would calm down that traffic because
Okay.
they're already going so fast. But that's really interesting, and I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a city in the San Antonio metro area. We had red light cameras.
Yeah,
And then once they started getting installed, we saw
it
traffic
changed traffic patterns.
big time. And I just want to make sure that's looked at.
That is good.
Even if it
to-
doesn't work, even if it doesn't happen here, at least maybe something can be looked at just so
Yeah,
we're not digging a hole for 5 years down the line
yep,
and wasting money.
yeah, interesting, yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I'm a big fan of red light cameras because, you know, it's a cheap way to make people go slower, but.
Sorry, one more comment. When you're coming eastbound on 99 from the middle of town, it's been 25, and you kind of get towards that cross section there, and you're looking kind of downhill, and the speeds all get up, and right ahead you can see that switch to 35, and everyone starts speeding up and then going a little faster than they're supposed to,
Yeah,
which is why coming up to this right-hand turn, people fly off of it like
Yeah, they
they're
are.
cats out of hell.
Yes.
So
yes.
I wonder if it would be possible to extend the 25 to
Mm.
at or about the right turn, or maybe just after it. I don't know. I know that's tricky with traffic flow and stuff like that, but that might also contribute to making people not speed up so quickly right as they're coming to that turnoff.
That's a
May-
really good question.
Maybe some sort of the calming treatment could be extended between this intersection and the previous one to the west to keep people from wanting to speed up through this stretch
Yeah,
as they arrive here.
that's a really good point. Cause it does make for, if they're, and they are, I've stood at that corner now quite a bit and they are coming in pretty hot. And if they are, and they slow down to make that right-hand turn, then there's a chance of rear end crashes right there. I don't know what, a speed feedback sign, have you guys done any of those with the city? There's mixed feelings on whether or not those are very effective, but that's that sign that tells you if you're going too fast kind of thing. Do you guys have any of those?
Yeah, we have some, there's one on Villa Road and then near the school on Mountain View. So
Mm-hmm. That's a really good idea. I'm gonna think about that with the engineers. I appreciate that. That's good thinking.
Why don't we move to?
Yeah,
your
let's
next
move on.
location?
Yeah, I have a feeling
We
I'm
can
gonna
catch
go
more
over.
questions if we have them.
Yeah, and later on you can, oh, I was gonna say, I should have started with this, but the online open house that also is open right now, I had them extend it through tomorrow night so that if you guys thought of anything later and you wanted to get online and get it in there or just say the same thing again, you could, but anyway, okay, great. So let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is really to show you the Church Street crossing. So I have heard from citizens that are coming from downtown in the couplet shopping and doing that, live out east, and then like want to come in and hit the grocery outlet before going home. Right? And so, and I've seen people standing out there at that Church Street crossing. One thing I heard from the city engineers, which I thought was a really good point that I've also wondered about, was whether or not that crossing at Church should also have the flashing pedestrian button beacon thing. I mean, I'm hoping that normally with this is actually sort of like it's a pretty narrow crossing. Normally, we wouldn't add that level of treatment at a crossing like this with the speeds and the volumes. It doesn't warrant it, if you will. But with the cars that are coming off of 219, or I'm sorry, 99, I do wonder about those speeds. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts around that.
Thank you. I walk it numerous times a week, and similar to what Commissioner Katz said, the same thing. People coming from west, flying down there, and I'm seeing a big uptick late at night. And I don't know if that's maybe creatures of habit, knowing where they're going, or maybe if it's other additional factors, but I'm starting to see the speed be more prevalent, higher speeds late at night. So I think that would be something, especially with the walkers and with, the bus stop right over there and stuff at the Walgreens.
Oh, yeah, there's a bus stop. Good
Yeah,
point.
there's a 44 bus stop, at the Walgreens right there. So a lot of that connectivity issues in front of the grocery outlet. So, and a lot of people I do see walking towards, South Church. I live over there.
Great.
So I see it quite often.
Great. That's good insight.
I also have a question here. Are you planning on extending the sidewalk width in that area also, on the south side? Where the houses are, that's just a difficult area to navigate also
Yeah,
as
yeah.
pedestrian. Is that something you guys are?
You
also
mean
looking at?
continuing the sidewalk where it ends today and just
Yes,
stops?
Yes.
Yes,
and then-
no, but I really want to. And so I can't do it with the ADA projects, and I won't get into all the reasons why, but they have sort of special permission to streamline their projects, and they don't have to do all the federal rules and regulations. And if you try and build sidewalk, it doesn't allow you to do that streamlining. It's really complex. But I was just talking to the city to get their feedback as well, and was talking to them about offering some pedestrian and bicycle money that I have that's different than, anyway, so that the city could come back and build that sidewalk connection. I agree. I think it's really important. Yeah.
So, two things. First of all, with respect to that piece of sidewalk,
Yeah.
yes, once we have our guys on board and they're trained, we will get that piece of sidewalk if you help us with some cash.
Yes. Yes, I can. And we have all the public right of way. There's a lot of right of way there. It's actually not the most complex piece of sidewalk that I've looked at.
So,
So we
great,
can
great
do it.
idea. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Second thing is I walk through there every single day of my life.
Okay.
And I would love to see, I'm speaking as Will Worthy, the resident now, not as a city manager. I would love to see any blinking crossing devices, anything that could be done there to slow people down a little bit.
I'm glad to hear you say that, but then I'm gonna have to come back and ask you about maintaining it, but we'll talk about that later.
Sure.
So I find myself wondering, are we talking about that would apply at both Church Street and Villa?
I don't think the Villa Crossing needs the flashing beacon
Because Church
level.
was kind of the first.
Because
when you're
Church
coming
is the first and Everest is the first, and they're like the bookends, and the cars are just people driving the cars. I should make this people first language. People driving those cars are going fast. And I think that Villa, once it's nestled in between there, would be okay with the volumes. Yeah. It's a good question, though. It sounds like we're on the right track with Church. One of my engineers threw out a kind of a crazy idea, and he said that this is kind of a crazy idea of making this block one way, kind of continuing. It's a little bit one way, like when cars first get off onto 219 and continuing that one way through here. But based on, I think it would require a bunch of additional outreach to like emergency services and stuff like that to make sure that everything worked and that circulation worked. And I don't have a ton of time, or like I want to get these crossings in. So I kind of think I'm going to let that go for now. But it could happen later. It doesn't preclude us from doing it at another time. So I just want to throw that out there.
That would also really limit people coming to Grocery Outlet or Circle K from the north. There-
Right,
because of
except
that
they could
median
turn
in the
off
highway.
99, right, to get into the
There's a
grocery
median
outlet.
in the highway, so you would only be able to access Grocery Outlet from,
Okay.
if you're coming from downtown.
I see. Go, okay, good. That's another good reason, because I want to keep that circulation. Great, thank you. I'm gonna say, yeah, yep, great. Okay, so let's move on so I don't completely take over your whole meeting, even though I would love to. So that orange piece of sidewalk is what I hope to do as a phase 2 with the city. I think it is really important because what I love most about that piece of sidewalk is it would keep some people from needing to cross at Everest, right? If they're going to the grocery outlet and they're coming from the neighborhood south of 219 or East First, they could come up, stay on the sidewalk and cross at Villa. And I really like that idea. The question here, I think, is just do you think we should have a crossing around there? And I'm guessing that you feel like that's a good spot for one, and not just down at Church and over at Everest.
So YCTA, is doing their mobility plan as well. And I know they've talked a lot about what the services in Newburgh look like.
Yep,
So I definitely think maybe reaching out to maybe seeing
Yep.
what their appetite is, because I know with that bus stop right there, if we're talking about putting that pedestrian crossing at Church and at Everest, if they can maybe look at changing their stop pattern, or maybe something, just because if you're gonna see people coming from Villa down to First, then having a second one may be redundant, but if you're getting a lot of activity from over there, it may be
Great.
one of those things you may just want to see what they have in mind.
yep, that sounds awesome. I'm coordinating with Yam Hill Transit on some other projects right now, so I had planned to actually, I'm really glad you reminded me to, that was gonna be kind of my last stop after getting feedback from you guys, so thank you for that reminder. Oh, yep,
Sorry, this wasn't planned. I just happened to live over there.
yeah,
So,
no, that's great.
So,
Did you sign up for public comment ahead of the meeting?
The accent, the super cool accent gives him a pass.
so, I wish. So, the one thing I did want to mention just is that there's all the way down the street into that neighborhood, when you get down past Villa, like below there,
Yep.
there are several spots where the school buses stop at.
Hmm.
So I always see kids who do need to cross right there
Oh, good to know.
to
Okay,
get down further south to get onto their school bus.
so kids are
Because I see those
crossing here.
kiddos all the time.
Good to know. That's validating. Perfect. Local insight, gotta love it. Okay, anything else at Villa? The other thing about filling in that crossing down there, I'm sorry, the sidewalk, is that I really don't want pedestrians crossing Villa Road, which is terrifying with those two turning lanes heading. It's just, yeah, so.
There'd be no reason to, because, I mean, the entrance to Walgreens, there's nothing really to be back there doing.
Yeah,
Right.
but if they're trying to use the crossing at Everest and then going to grocery outlet, then yes. So if we get that sidewalk infill in, that gives them another path. And I really like that idea.
Um,
Yeah,
One other thing here with the grocery outlet, the exit from the parking lot onto First Street heading south. Legally, the only option is to turn right because there's a double line there. But then they're stuck with this really weird situation where they go down here, turn left, down all the way around, find their way back again. It's this really convoluted way to get out. I see tons of people, may have done it myself, who will look at the oncoming traffic coming from the left and go, oh, I'm clear, there's no one coming this way, and they'll risk it and swing over there.
did you go left over the double yellow? I'm not a traffic engineer.
Well,
Is it a single double or a double double?
it's a double.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Double
No, can't.
So I was just. Whether it's legal or not, it's very dangerous.
Okay,
Because of the way the traffic coming this way, you've got anyone in the far right lane will turn. Anyone in the left lane, you don't know if they're gonna turn right or go straight. And many people never put their blinkers on.
yeah,
Yeah, so, cause they're just
Okay.
thinking, I'm gonna turn right.
yeah,
So anyway, this whole setup is really dangerous. And the only concern I have with putting a crosswalk there
yeah,
is that you are putting more pedestrians in the way of an already dangerous situation. Now, that might help slow things down also when people see it. But if there might
Yeah.
be some other things we could do, maybe
Yeah.
post a clear sign, do not turn left out of this parking lot. I don't know.
uh-huh,
Something along
yeah,
those lines.
interesting. I'll ask that question. I don't know if I have the power to limit turning movements. It's usually on the city, or enforcement.
So I'm just trying to visualize what you're saying.
Yeah.
So if you're coming out of Grocery Outlet onto First Street, you'd say, don't turn left out, then you would just close off that exit then coming out of that parking lot? Is that what you're in?
Well,
thinking?
you'd force them to turn right, which would send them down the road, and then they'd have to turn left onto Church Street, and then left onto Second, and then all the way down to Everest and left. and
Oh,
then-
yeah.
It's terrible.
That'd be a mess. Nobody would even do that.
I know,
Why
and
don't you go up
that's,
north and just leave on 99? Is that?
Yeah,
There's the median, so you have to do an illegal lane change to get into
Oh,
the
man.
turning signal to pull a
Okay.
U and
it's
head
not
back
enough,
Okay.
south.
not enough time to get all the way over to the left to turn around.
It's a median. I need to look
Yeah.
at that. That's not in my study area, so I didn't know about the median. Okay. Which is a big safety benefit, but anyway, okay. Yeah, so we'll look at that, but mostly it's that you want to make sure that the people crossing there are as visible as they can be from turning vehicles.
Also, the people coming from the east straight who are not gonna turn right onto Villa, they're gonna keep going straight.
Yeah,
They're going really fast as well, so that.
well,
is-
hopefully
yeah,
the
If we slow
the
them down.
green over
earlier,
here,
yeah.
those bulbs should help
Yeah.
slow them down. The flashing beacons at church should help if it's going. So hopefully those speeds calm, but I hear you. Another thing, dare I plant an idea? We're being recorded. Another thing that I've seen some people do in situations like this are raised crosswalks, and the pedestrians get like a little higher, and then it's that big, it's a speed table.
We
You
have
call the
we have a
speed
couple in
table, or
Lafayette, I think, when you guys
Ra-
did the project a couple of years ago, you put some out there
did we?
on Market or Market Jefferson. There's some out there. There's the race crosswalks that kind of give us that barrier.
Yeah, do you
Yeah.
feel like they're effective in slowing down vehicles and making pedestrians visible? Okay. Anyway, that's a thought. I could ask about it, but anyway, but I'm hearing what you're saying and we just need to maximize the visibility for the pedestrians there. Okay.
I think you have one more location.
Yeah, I have one more. We better get to it. Thank you in the back there. The toughest one, we left the toughest one for last. So here's the deal. I'm gonna stand up. Can I stand up? So by today's standards, this crossing over here, this is where it is today, and it's an old flashing system. So we know that the flashers could be a new system, which are brighter and more eye-catching, so that's a no-brainer.
Jenna, I wonder if that device maybe has a laser pointer.
Oh,
And
so
then
that
you
you
could
can
stay
keep
on the
hearing
mic.
me? And my voice isn't loud enough?
But I don't
Okay,
know
great.
if people are
Thanks.
listening.
I used to teach. I love moving around. Okay, but no, that's fair. So this is where the crossing is today. We've heard a lot of concerns here. I know pedestrians have been hit here. It's really challenging. People are coming in really fast, westbound, because it feels really urban out here. There's no sidewalks. They've been driving fast. They're used to driving fast. Nothing cues them to slow down, right? This is just human nature stuff. And then there's 2 lanes of traffic here, and they're jockeying for position to get to where they want to be at the signal on Villa over here. At the same time, people are pulling out here. You guys know all this. They're turning left. They want to get left. It's hard to find a gap in traffic. You're looking over to the right. You're not watching for a pedestrian crossing here. And then as soon as you see a gap, you accelerate to make that left-hand turn. And if someone happens to be in that crosswalk, that's bad. So what we would normally do at a crossing like this, if we were looking at it today, we would say, what would be all the things that you need to make it safe enough? And the key thing, the key safety feature would be a pedestrian refuge island. That's the most important safety countermeasure that you can get out of an enhanced crossing, including that pet island is supposedly the even safer, giving you more safety benefit than the lights, those flashing lights. And we can't fit one of those in. Remember, I'm looking for low-hanging fruit, active transportation improvements. And so, and there's 3 lanes of traffic and there's a lot of pressure here. So unless you talked about putting an island right here and pinching this down, which would stack up traffic back here and traffic here, which, you know, might be a choice that you make because that's pedestrian safety. There's trade-offs, right? So my thought was the team, and we've all been looking at this and struggling with it and standing on this corner and crossing it. And I mean, middle of the night, middle of the day, it's really tough, you guys. And, oh, and by the way, I do know that your transportation system plan calls for a signal here. It's not warranted yet. There's not enough traffic yet, blah, blah, blah. But someday there may be a signal here. So I just want you to know that I know that. I acknowledge that that is the desire of the community and we're not there yet. And so what can we do now to make it better near term to bring safety benefits sooner rather than later? So that's what we're looking for. And so we looked at moving this to the east side of the intersection, adding that pedestrian refuge island because there's room for it. You only have to pass 2 lanes of traffic. I think the big key thing here, other than the island, is that we would also add advanced flashers. So when someone hits the button here, these would go too. Now, unfortunately, I can't get the ADA program because of the scope of their project and whatever to fully build out sidewalks and all that kind of stuff. It would be this kind of rural crossing, kind of where there's just sort of that yellow bumpy thing at the end, and it would be pedestrians would be standing on the shoulder. And so I'm definitely hearing, I don't think the city's super excited about that, and I totally get it. So I'd love to get some reactions from you guys.
Means my office is about a half a block from where this intersection is.
Are you at the insurance office right there?
Yes.
Oh, man, I've been talking to somebody there.
No, not right on the
Oh,
corner.
okay, okay,
I'm back
okay,
about a half a block from.
okay. Yeah, tell me about
But, I mean, half the time, because I'm coming out of there all the time, the pedestrians don't even push the button.
it. Yeah, I can't fix that.
I know, you can't fix. can't
That's
fix
really
Goofy,
frustrating, but I
but-
can't fix that, yeah.
But why not cut back on some of the other expenses and put a light there? A traffic light. Because I think it is warranted. And then you
Yeah.
don't do all these Band-Aid kind of fixes. Because it's so difficult at that intersection. If you gotta take a left, you can't hardly do it because
Yeah.
of the traffic.
Yeah.
It's hard to take a right, and if you're across, I mean, to come straight across, it's crazy there.
Yeah, it is crazy.
And I still think that if you did some of these other things, you're still gonna have a problem there. Now, if you have a light there, though, you're going to actually really slow up the traffic and back things up, especially if you're gonna slow things up coming off of 99 onto First Street, you're gonna have a bottleneck. That's why I'm thinking put some more signage out there of some sort, or maybe we have our police officers work that area a little bit better. Not better, that was a poor choice of words. Work it more often
Yeah,
and, so that people in the area know, gotta slow down and put a light there.
yeah. I hear you. I don't know if I can't get you a traffic signal with this project, but I think that we need to sit down with the city, especially since there's so many new staff and our traffic engineers, and talk about what it takes to get one there. Other thoughts?
Thank you. I'd like to echo, Councilor McBride.
Okay,
I really think that if the red light camera does happen in Villa, it's really gonna change traffic patterns on First. And I really, really think that needs to really be looked at thoroughly as much as it can, only because I've been a part of seeing a red light roll out and how much traffic it put onto the non-major street. And it became a major concern, like, for the community and for the surrounding, residential, structures.
Understood. Can I ask the people in the room who know it, if part of your answer can also include, where do you think people are? One of the things I've been trying to figure out is where people are trying to go. We call it the desire line. I'm assuming that people who cross at Everest are going Walgreens or grocery outlet more than they're going to the stuff on the east side, but I'd love to. You go north, okay.
So, once again, I apologize for speaking at the meeting. I really didn't realize it was going to be about my own neighborhood. To echo what has been said, I mean, ideally, a signalized light, I think, would really help solve a lot of these problems. I understand the budgetary constraints. I do think that the red light camera that is proposed on Villa is probably not going to impact this junction. I don't see people being diverted down there because that's mainly the route to Salem. And I just don't think that's going to happen. But I do think that in an ideal world, if there was some way that we could get a light signal here, that would really help the whole problem be diminished.
would something like a flashing red be a possibility, like a forced stop? Because I mean, I don't see like a great solution out of anything like
Yeah.
at this stage, and have you guys considered that?
There isn't a flashing red. There's a few treatments that do up the ante. So you're thinking along the same lines we were. There's something called a hawk that does flash yellow and then it flashes red. It's called I don't know, a pedestrian hybrid beacon, a PHB. We don't do them a lot in Oregon. They're used really widely in Tucson. If you've ever visited there, that's where they were invented. Huge 5-6 lane roads, just crazy. And it's a big overhead light. It looks more like a signal. It's about $1 million, $1.5 million for a big mast arm because it's the same cost as like a signal pole. And then there is a pedestrian signal that turns red, but there's some specific rules around it. But let me ask about a pedestrian signal because I don't remember the rules and why we didn't look at that here. Can I ask you guys real quick reactions to what came out of my meeting with the city for feedback? And that was, move the flashers back, keep the pedestrian crossing where it is today. Add advanced flashers that flash down on the east end so that those cars coming in fast know it's, something's happening here. Keep this pedestrian island here so that it narrows the roadway and just kind of channelizes those cars. And then you'd have the new flashing system. And I mentioned that we talked a little bit about the raised crosswalks and like a speed hump over here. So more traffic calming coming in, then the pedestrians are raised at the crossing. P.S. ODOT hasn't done a raised crosswalk anywhere in the state system, and I really want one. So I thought this might be a spot.
Right.
Yeah. Right, so it brings the pedestrians up, and then if the cars hit it going too fast, you feel it. And so once the locals learn that that's what's there, they're gonna, if you're making that left turn and they know that it kind of goes up and over and down, then they might make that left turn more slowly too, which means they'd be more likely to have more time to see a pedestrian crossing. It's an idea, so it's adding more traffic calming bells and whistles, but keeping the crossing on that west leg.
So my concern would be that if you add the island that's shown in blue, that the drivers who are traveling westbound are gonna, at the place they're currently starting to spread out,
Mm-hmm,
they're gonna stay together in one lane.
they will.
And then they're gonna be spreading out right at the place they're dealing with the crossing.
That's a good point.
I think maybe if there was a second one of those, what's shown in blue, on the other side,
Oh,
so that they didn't spread out until after the crossing. To me, that would, I think, be more clear.
interesting idea.
Finish crossing the pedestrian crossing and then split into two.
I feel like the police department might have given some feedback to the city kind of along those lines. In fact, they might have even proposed using this for a pet island, using one lane, keeping it as one lane through here. And then, but someone did, maybe it wasn't, I shouldn't. But anyway, that would be it would be congested. There's no doubt that
Well, it's
if
already
you,
just one lane approaching here.
I know, it is just one lane approaching, but that means all the vehicles turning would have to take it wider, which would give the pedestrians more time to be seen. But it would definitely create a pinch point. So basically be drawing out, it's kind of what you're saying, except you're actually closing off,
Yeah.
you're not letting them jockey for position until they've gotten through the intersection. The city would get calls, I'm guessing.
So, question, do you have access to some best practices, be it nationwide? I've got to
Yeah.
think you're not the first
No, you're
traffic
not.
safety.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the stuff I'm talking about are best practices, right? It's the flashing beacons, it's the pedestrian island, it's the traffic calming. It's just then every particular intersection is kind of unique, right? But what you are missing, maybe is we do have traffic counts that we did here to get an analysis of how many people are making which turns, how many pedestrians moved through it. We did a 16-hour count as part of our study. And I think that with that data, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but with that data, you might be able to do some analysis of the queuing, of like what would happen if you took that inside lane for a pedestrian island. So I could come back to the city or you guys with that. I mean, is that something you think I should look at, like closing down that, just keeping it one lane through there? I know.
Okay, now it went to rain. Okay, I think you're gonna just clog it up more. You're gonna slow it down to where it's not gonna be functional, it's just going to clog things. I mean, there's a difference, I think, being functional and moving the traffic than I think it's just gonna bottleneck there.
Mhm. It's hard to know without the analysis for sure.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to mention that like in your count, you're not capturing the people who are no longer willing to walk in that area because it's so dangerous.
Totally. I actually don't pay hardly any attention to the pedestrian counts for
Okay.
that very reason.
Okay,
And
thank you.
thank you for saying it. But the traffic counts are what I feel like I'd need to see sort of what those impacts would be here. But you're right about pets. Yep.
Yeah, so I wonder what some of your best traffic safety engineers would say about the, I'm an industrial engineer, so you suddenly start talking queuing theory and my ears perk up. Yeah, you've got, there's science that
Yes.
plays into all, and human factors engineering
Yeah.
goes into this
Yes.
more. And while there's a lot of good judgments here, perhaps there is a little more engineering science that could be applied to this. Personally, I like, now go back to the judgment thing though. I like the raised crosswalk thing
Mhm.
because that gives you both the effect of the island a little bit while slowing down all the traffic without disrupting the flow, to Mike's point here. Enough said.
I'll keep it quick. I just want to make sure all of our peers know all the work you're doing is great. But remember, this is going to be geared towards the walker and the active pedestrian. We got to think that it's going to upset some drivers regardless of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We see this all across the country. Change is hard. But we have to think about the pedestrians and the bikers, not about the cars here. So.
Yeah.
I really feel that the westbound traffic is one lane opening up into two,
Mm-hmm.
whether we change anything or not. And moving the point of transition a little bit, I think is worth looking at.
I'm trying to picture, yes, and I'm gonna write that down too, but I'm trying to picture, do you think, so we can't pull this out through the intersection, because then you'd block all
No, it
these
just
things.
would be a parallel one on the other side.
Okay, so like a little traffic separator,
Teardrop.
a little teardrop. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we have room for that without getting into the bike lane, but I'm gonna see if we do.
Yeah, see what you can do.
I like it. To keep the drivers channelized.
They just wouldn't split from one lane into two until after they cross the pedestrian
From
crossing.
splitting, yep, into two lanes until they get through. Yes, thank you. I was like, how do I write that?
So let me check in. Do you have more locations to cover?
No, let's see what our next slide says. I know I'm out of time. I'm gonna come back, or we're gonna be doing an online open house about the roadway reconfiguration. Let's go ahead and, skip that. They make it safer for everybody, 47% reduction in a classic roadway, which is going from a 5 to a 3 in crashes. So they're really beneficial, but mostly it gives you space to accommodate the other modes in a more comfortable way. So I'm gonna just leave it there and come back to you guys with cross sections for that. And I think there might be one more. And then I think we're good. I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. So can you flip it one more time? That's what I just said. So let's go again. All that is what I kind of said. Let's go again. I think we're good because and that's, you can just flip through to the end. That's fine. We're there. The online open house, will close tomorrow night at midnight. You could still, you can submit comments. You could send them to Brett, no problem. And then I'll be back, doing more work on the road diet. The roadway reconfiguration, I can't leverage on to the ADA project again, so that's why I'm doing these crossings now. And then we'll talk about that later, and then that would have to come through with another project that we don't have funding for yet. So I just want to set clear expectations.
Can you give us the web address for the online open house off the top of your head, or?
No, because
Okay.
it's not simple. It should be. But we sent out if you look up Newburgh UDV, yeah, then you'll find it. Anything else? Gosh, thanks you guys so much. I had like 2 pages of notes. That was awesome. You can also just email me, by the way, if you just want to like add a comment, something that you think of later. Really appreciate it. We'll let you know.
What's your email address? Oh, thank you.
Yeah, yep, phone number, yeah. And just so you know, I asked people on the online open house if they lived in that neighborhood off of like 219 and if they wanted us to follow up with concepts for them. Like, I didn't know how many people would want to give me their contact information, like, and like 37 people, I think, provided their email and said, yes, we want to look at concepts. So it's really amazing how engaged your community is. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Cool. Let me know if you have more questions. Thanks for all the time. I'm sure I'm way over. Thank you.
Thank you for
And,
being here. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, you will. I'll be back.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Good discussion. Let's move to staff reports and general information. First up says the police.
Hello there. I don't have anything specific stat-wise to go over, but just some general stuff going on amongst the police department over the last couple of months. We had Speeding Awareness Month last month being March, so we did some focused traffic enforcement for speeding. This month is Distracted Driving Awareness Month, which we're focusing on mostly people driving on their cell phones. We get grant money from ODOT to hire officers additional overtime shifts, and they sign up for that on 2 or 3 hour blocks, and they'll go out and just focus specifically on those types of traffic offenses, so that they're not getting dispatched to other calls. They just specifically assigned to deal with that specific traffic offense. So, and then probably next month or between May and June, we're going to do a crosswalk or pedestrian operation due to some complaints about the safety of getting across First and Hancock Street through the downtown corridor. We had that scheduled, I think, last month, but it was a bad batch of weather and it got canceled. And it just makes more sense to plan it when there's more pedestrians out and as we get into the spring months. I was tasked with coming up with some information on our worst intersection list, and I think Brett, we worked together and kind of came up with a list. I anticipate you might have some questions about how I came up with some of that data. So throughout the meeting, if you have questions, or do you want me to explain anything about how I came up with the data that I did, I'd be happy to chat about it. So as always, I'm open to any questions throughout the meeting.
Is that this list that was in our agenda materials, just like a 1-page listing? Okay. Yes, I think now's the time. I do have some questions. I wasn't sure exactly what it meant that it's a three months of data over a 3-year period.
No, I anticipate that wasn't going to be clear to everyone. So in our data system, when the public calls in that there's been a crash or some sort of an incident, like a traffic related crash, a call is generated in our system and it's titled as a motor vehicle collision, injury, non-injury. It doesn't specify whether it's a pedestrian or a bike. I know that through my experience that very small sampling of crashes that get reported are actually legitimate crashes. Sometimes it's just a hazard, sometimes it's a stalled vehicle, or it's a misunderstanding, or it's multiple people calling about the same one incident. So the calls that come in, the amount of calls isn't indicative of how many actual crashes there are. And I'll give you an example. I went back 2 years and I printed out every traffic crash that was called in. There was over 800 of them in 2 years. Now I know that that data is not accurate of how many crashes we actually responded to in that time frame. We also, with the systems that we have, I can't just, there's no machine that prints out the data through all these 800 calls that will tell me which ones are bicycle, which ones are pedestrians, which ones are legitimate crashes, which are injury, which are non-injury. And so I have to manually go into each one of these calls and look them up and read the data. And over 800 calls would take forever. So I just took a 3-month sampling of the 2 years, and I took the time to go through 3 months of calls.
Was that the same 3 months each year?
No, I just went through I think it was the 2023 or one of the last 3 years.
Title sounds like it's three years or somehow represented, and
No,
maybe that's where I
what I had was the 800 calls over a 2-year period of time, just the last 2 years.
Okay.
And then I just took a 3-month sampling of 3 consecutive months out of
Just in the middle of that period.
Right.
Okay.
And I individually looked up each call and read them, and then just did a sampling of what the worst, which intersections were the most damaging, was as far as calls for service. And I could have told you what they were without even looking at the calls, because they're always the same intersections. And I gave you just the sampling, and I think Brett organized it a little bit better than I had originally. And that's how I came up with the data, and happy to answer any questions beyond that.
So the number, is that the number of incidences that occurred at that
Correct.
intersection
Those are
in that
those
3-month period?
correct.
But nothing to say what kind of crash it was?
No. And I knew right away Portland and Springbrook would be the number one. I mean, that's far and away the most dangerous intersection here. And I very quickly, jumped right to the top with my sampling of that 3 months. So I believe that this is pretty accurate with what you're going to find. If I were to look up each 800 individual calls, I think it would still spell out this way.
Are there other questions?
So these are only the calls that get reported. So say there's a fender bender that happens in an area and you're like, it's not $2,000 worth of damage. We're not gonna
Oh, that's a
call
great
in
point.
the police. So
This would not include people who just pull to the side and exchange information and never
Okay.
report it to the
right,
police.
okay, just check it.
I guess if some members of the public brought a particular intersection to our attention somewhere in the near future, do you have a way to go back and look at a specific intersection and see more details about what has been experienced there?
Yes, we can do scans of individual intersections. It's basically a search for cross streets
Okay,
and find calls for service that way.
so all of that data can be searched that way without having to go through 800 records every time?
Ideally, yes.
Yes,
Yes.
All
Yes.
right. I think what it sounds like is a need for some more resources to support this, with some data entry and analysis that you don't really have the reach for. Okay. Any other questions on this? Okay. Well, yeah, go ahead.
Have you looked at other resources that might be available, volunteer resources that might be available to help put that data into some kind of a usable base? One of the things, for example, our Rotary Club is looking at partnering with George Fox and some of the students over there that are studying communication and that kind of stuff to help us communication. Has there been any discussion or any look, are there any local resources that might provide some volunteer opportunity to help do more analysis or provide more data about these particular things? You know, what's happening at these intersections? You say 4, but you know, what happened there? Was it speeding involved? Was it drinking involved? Was it, you know, that kind of stuff?
Right, that would be very interesting information to have. I'm not aware of the resources that would harvest that specific of data without tracking it some way or having a software program that tracked it. Just currently, our systems just don't do that. In 2024, I would love to say that we could just map out all the crashes that had to do with bikes or pedestrians or involved drunk driving, or typically currently our systems just don't do that.
Okay, well, thank you for the report, and we're now better informed, so we know where to go. We know where we are. Engineering report, I guess, is next. Les.
So senior engineer, Brett Music. So kind of just retouching on with the slide we have in front of us, just kind of purpose of the Traffic Safety Commission and the duties there. Actually, slide back to the other engineers who will touch on that in the next one. But just kind of the engineering report. You go back 2 slides, actually. Good. One more. Just stop it with the engineering on the staff report in that scenario. So active issues log back in January when I came onto this, I had not had a chance to go through that and kind of get that updated. So I've since done that. There are a number of things that are still ongoing and still need to do research and gather information on. There's a number of those that were completed and those are shown on the active issues log. And then there's a couple of recent ones in the action and several locations. And then going back to the history of this, even when I was with the Traffic Safety Commission liaison in my early years with the city, the First and Everett Street has definitely come up frequently, and it's issues that are on there currently, fairly recently, some comments. So it's good to see that ODOT is looking at that intersection and some items are being proposed there that I think will be helpful. Just any questions on the active issues log or any of the items there that you have? And
How great of an imposition would it be to be able to just add a column that highlighted the location, the street name or intersection names, rather than bury it in the paragraphs?
That's a step that as I was doing this compilation, and that's a direction I was kind of headed in when I was last involved with it. So yeah, I think we could definitely make some updates to this with make it clear to what the intersection or the location.
Very
is.
helpful.
Yeah, for certain.
I have a
Any
question.
other?
On page 3,
Yep.
down, like the second item, it's dated 1/22/24, expressed a concern about street lighting along 14th.
Yeah,
The comment is kind of confusing to me.
with regards to the street lighting and that being within the Yamhill County jurisdiction.
But it's in the
component of-
city.
It's in the city, but the street itself is still under Yamhill County jurisdiction. There's a number of streets that are still that way. Basically, they're not not developed all the way to city standards as development had occurred or not occurred. The street is still in the condition that Yamhill County had. So when some improvements have done, like on Waterford, there's a few improvements that have been done for the River Run Phase 3 on the one side. So that improvements is to city standards as a step towards eventually city taking jurisdiction of those, but that transfer has not occurred.
So what would cause that to happen? Or what, how does that?
Typically, what happens is there's 2 scenarios that can happen. As development occurs both sides of the road gets developed to the city standards, and then there's a request. A lot of times, Yamhill County is going to make that request to the city to take that jurisdiction. The city's going to make that determination to do so. Otherwise, the other scenario is like in the case of East Crestview Drive, when that connection was made up to the Crestview Crossing scenario, that piece on the northeast section of town. That one, the city did the project to improve the gravel street and improve the paving and do the improvements there. The city requested to transfer the jurisdiction so that we could build it to our standards and not have the county permitting.
Would this be a location where system development charge funds could be used to install lights in that area?
The street lighting within the area, that being county jurisdiction, we probably wouldn't do that until it happened, but it's possible that there's something, a project could get created for that. It's just not a project that we have currently or.
I drove down through that area. Boy, I mean, it's really dark down through there, long ways, and I can understand the concern about that through there.
That's what the part of the conference to try to convey that information that we do have that as an issue there, so.
Any other questions on the?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
To your point, Rick, about, putting in a separate column, and I recommend that the intersections, the way the intersections have been named in the officer's report here, you use that same, terminology so that we can more easily cross-reference then between, the accident report enumeration and issues. So, sorry, kind of stumbling, didn't say that too well, but you get the idea. Yeah. But, and I will say one other thing. So I do note the very last entry, March 6th, and perhaps everyone else noted this too. It's also about First and Everett, the intersection we were just speaking about, in which, the citizen had an idea of you putting in a roundabout. It's kind of one thing we didn't discuss here, but I'm done.
I have one other comment. Would it be too much inconvenience to also have a column of maybe tracking how often this is a recurring complaint? Because, I mean, for example, Dayton Avenue, I mean, that comes up every time. And it would be maybe good to have some data about how much this has been complained about in the past as well.
Yeah, no, I think I understand the question and the column I think is a good idea. That maybe, I've been thinking of different ways to do that same thing and how to capture when something is a repeat comment. And sometimes
So
it's just-
I have the idea that if there was a column with the location, you could just sort on that column. And then everything in the same location would just show up all
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, there's, in the past, I've done different sorting mechanisms in order to show things and separate this. So as this is, it's just really a date driven as it is the sort right now. In the past, I've done sorts where it's by what's completed, what's ongoing, what's at different stages, what the status is, the locations or elements there. We can definitely look at some different ways of doing that. As like I'd mentioned before, I view this as kind of a living document that we'll keep, we're making refinements to as we go forward and add information and progress.
Thank you, Brett. Sometimes it's not about the quantity, but the quality of it. This is a good report. Hopefully, although things being requested of you, you have enough time. I just want to make sure that, we support, we just, seems like a lot of direction going this way. I just want to make sure you have enough time to get it done, and thank you. It's a good report.
Good, I appreciate that. That's kind of why I didn't want to rush into things back in January and present things that might have been
And we're
incomplete.
understaffed, right? So we also have a position to hire for.
I have a question. Does this crash data get reported to ODOT? I mean, to tell them the crashes we're having in our community are mainly occurring on ODOT jurisdiction? And any discussion going on about how do we, correct these, or how do we solve some of these issues?
Yeah, to my knowledge, that's not reported to ODOT in any fashion, like Sergeant Hagan was referring to, is like, this is a lot of the crash volumes that you described is, those are reports, and what is the detail of that? And without having to, correct me if I can still go straight here, Sergeant Hagan, is typically if there's a concern with an intersection, then the data can be mined more and gain more of what is truly going on once something has occurred and elements. And my understanding also is that ODOT does do periodic investigations of things whenever they look at it. It rises to elements. What I've done a little bit of research into other communities, the amounts, while the numbers we see for us, it's concerning. For ODOT at the state level and other locations are much worse than what ours are. So it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of their concern as being as great as what ours are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the report, and we'll look forward to continuing to work with it. Appreciate that.
And just as, the other item on the engineering staff report is kind of related to the capital improvement projects.
yes.
We talked about the North Main at Illinois study, kind of as the city manager indicated, we have funding concerns, and with that, so that project is being canceled, and we are also as in the middle of doing budget and then establishing what the next capital improvement projects are going to be that we'll be working on and getting that confirmed and moving forward. So there'll be more to come with that. And then the red light cameras, just kind of an update on that the coordination between the vendor and ODOT is ongoing on those. So that's moving forward.
Brett, on the North Main in Illinois, you mentioned canceled. Does that mean it's completely off the charts, or are we gonna look at this later on, maybe in a couple of
Well,
years when we have some money?
Yeah, as the city manager indicated, he's got some ideas to move some
Okay.
things forward. It's just we had a consultant on board and
Okay.
a very specific process we're going to be following. That is what has been canceled, to kind of what the
Oh,
meeting
okay.
concerned, and that's been turned into.
Okay, cool.
move Forward at this
Awesome.
time.
Thank you.
Next up, let's talk about our work plan. So this is the thing that attempts to capture the actions that we took at our last meeting, taking that giant list and combining things and getting rid of things and so on. And so I guess it's for us to review and say, do we think he got it? I think so, partly because I fed him some of my suggestions. So I like the way he passed forward my suggestions. But I think the other half, well, first question is, do we think this captures what we intended? And the second question would be, okay, now what? You know, what are we gonna do next? So do you have any other comments?
Yeah, just one comment is I think there was a question earlier regarding, we had the discussion and all of the going back and forth with the long list of things we had and which ones we combined and then eliminated and that. So the last page in your agenda included, basically, that was my attempt to kind of scratch through the things that were deleted and red. The others are ones that we addressed and either combined or were set to be tabled. And so just to kind of see where all that discussion got done into this future tasks update at the very last page. And then that led to the breaking that out into this work plan. And Vice Chair Marshall had given me the kind of suggestion of what he was seeing from the meeting, which is very similar to what my own was, as the discussion really was leading towards a work plan. And so that's what that's been titled at this stage, and breaking it up into the two columns, the way it worked out there is the things we just have the ongoing things that we'll be working as the liaison and things there. And then basically what the Traffic Safety Commission's kind of your work plan really came down to one item, as I saw it from pulling things together, related to what's going on with just as it states, reviewing the current planning and code documents and then looking to see if there's any changes that you're looking to propose or recommend to council for things. So
discussion.
Yeah, I had a question on number 9, item to revisit, create action item regarding social media presence for TSC. I wasn't at the last meeting, but I did watch it on YouTube, and I want to reiterate, we're not looking for an actual TSC specific social media that's going to be manned. It's going to be more of just the traffic office, the engineering office managing a traffic engineering item and then posting about the TSC and ways that, all that kind of stuff, right?
the way I was interpreting that one from the discussion and and reading through some of the documentation, what led to that being listed as a task, it had to do with kind of what's going to be coming up as public outreach as a whole through things that the Traffic Safety Commission would identify as what they would like to get promoted out into those avenues.
Okay. But in terms of managing that, that's going to come from the engineer's office, right?
As far as managing that, what there would be is, I guess, in terms of the Traffic Safety Commission, as I'm envisioning, it would come up with ideas of what you would like to see promoted in that regard. And then through the engineering liaison to traffic safety, we'd be working with Emily with public engagement aspects of things.
Okay. That's our next item on the agenda besides. Roger.
This study that ODOT's doing is great. I think it's great timely because there's a number of issues that we've been talking about. Is there a way to inform the Traffic Safety Commission on what ODOT's plans are or what they're working on, or, I mean, this is kind of just, wow, this thing came up and I would have expected we would have known about what ODOT was doing in Newburgh.
You learned about it not too, or at least I was able to forward it on, not too far behind whenever I learned about it. So it is the nature, and I think it's driven a lot by the funding elements. A lot of times there's things going in the background. We don't necessarily give you that information until they're ready to move it forward, which is what I believe occurred with this one.
I guess in some sort of ideal world, it'd be a scenario where they had somebody delegated to come to our meetings and give us periodic updates, but you know, we'll see. So I have just a couple of questions about the long-range planning aspect of this. I know you mentioned to us at our last meeting that the transportation system plan, which I think we still need to standardize what we call it all the time. I don't think it has the word master in the title as I reviewed it online. I think you told us that there's a specific timeline for when it's coming up for its planning process. But my question is, do the other things on the list also have such timelines, or do they just naturally follow? And that one kind of needs to go first.
Yeah, so kind of within transportation system plan, you're correct. The typical terminology is a transportation system plan, unlike the other infrastructure, water, master plans, wastewater, and then that element's there. The other plans that are associated, the only one that kind of fed into the system, the transportation system plan as it is the ADA pedestrian bike route improvement plan. That's an older plan. And most of the information from that got incorporated into the TSP when it was updated in that piece of it. So this was background information that was provided of what kind of led to where we're at currently within that. The other plans in Newburgh Downtown Improvement Plan and the Riverfront Master Plan, those are things that occurred. Some of those are just one-offs. That's where they are. They're not necessarily things that happen on updates or elements there. And similar with the city municipal code, there are amendments that are done periodically. Some of them are cleanup scenarios. Some of it are new things of what to address issues and changing times and current.
So
standards.
remind me what you said the timeline is for the transportation system plan?
We don't have a definitive plan on that one. Our code, the only one that actually our code says is to be updated on master plans, infrastructure master plans, is the stormwater master plans every 5 years. The rest of those do not have a set timeline. The typical scenario is in the 5 to 10 year range for a transportation
And it's
system plan.
kind of older than that already.
Correct.
Yeah.
So just a matter of kind of finding the funding.
Any
and
minute now.
The pieces in that to make it all happen. But it
Well,
is
I
definitely in the list
see,
of.
I definitely see a role for this commission when that happens.
Yeah.
I don't know, I reviewed the plan as it exists, and it's a bit challenging because it's at a certain place in time, you know, it doesn't include the bypass. You know, and I'm brand new in town, and even I know that's a disconnect. So it makes sense that it needs doing, but I don't think that there's anything in particular about our sort of niche responsibility that needs us to go say, make it happen any sooner than whatever is going to make it happen. Just make sure we're at the table when it does. And then it seems like the ADA pedestrian bike stuff, I could picture just being sort of captured by that process and not really needing a separate effort. And the one that I think really rises to my attention that may be the place for this group to have more involvement is the traffic calming policy. I don't have anything in particular that I think needs doing, but it feels just like it has sort of a different status, and maybe that's the place for us to look at for next time or something. But those are my thoughts for discussion.
And I'll just add a couple of comments, I guess, onto that, kind of along with what the purpose of with the Traffic Safety Commission that's in the code is kind of that element of making recommendations, things that you identify. The education component, that's going to be the public outreach and things we can talk about on that piece of it. But I think you're right, that traffic calming scenario and is one to very likely to focus on too, and come up several times when I look back to the meeting minutes from last year and others. The other piece of that is then, even though the the traffic system plan may not be imminent that it's coming there, if there's things that you're looking to, would like to see implemented into that or be discussed or targets, elements, those are certainly things you can start to compile for recommendations for whenever that occurs to see that to happen.
How does plans of other government agencies adjacent to or incorporating within, for example, the CPRD plans of trails and stuff like that, how does that get incorporated into what the city's looking at? Or is there communication that goes on between Yamhill County, CPRD, the city? Because it seems like they're all doing planning, but it sounds like it's not integrated.
Yeah, so from for the county to the city, there are jurisdictional limits, the planning kind of where that interface is. I've not been involved with a lot of where that's occurred, but we've had very limited things that actually occur within those boundaries where it's a city project to the county project in scenarios. Well, as far as CPRD, yeah, when the transportation system plan was updated, they get asked questions. When the riverfront master plan was done, they get brought to the table and we coordinate that elements there. So there's definitely cooperation that occurs. There's always, as with any two entities, there's always going to be more cooperation and more collective and collaboration that they can always be worked towards. And so I envision that continuing to do so.
I do know that CPRD has some definite plans and funding that they're going to be doing, and just wanting to make sure that what the city has in mind and what they have in mind are integrated together, so you don't end up with something coming down and stops here and starts over here again.
Yeah, and we work to minimize, to avoid that scenario for certain there. And a lot of their projects that will come through the city will go through the city's planning division and department under a land use review process as well. And that's kind of where, when engineering reviews those, we are looking for those alignments and making certain that things are matching up.
Other discussion on the work plan? Okay, I don't, oh, yes, go ahead.
We spent a lot of time last year on the nuisance vehicles, code revision. And sent that forward, and I don't know if there's any work item follow-up for us. It would seem, looking at this point, that there's not, but is there any update, Will?
So the city was very thankful that you guys raised this particular item and it was forwarded. Obviously, I believe it maybe was Paul, the other engineer, that looked over it a bit. And then it came forward, it was reviewed by Police and Patrol. Sergeant Ronning had a look at that and made some suggestions. And then Miller Nash, our attorney, had a look at it. So this is an item that will be coming before council. I can't remember the specific date, but Emily's much younger than me. Do you recall when? Okay, so the work that you did, extremely valuable, and we recognize that. There were a few tweaks that were suggested to make it work with what Patrol needs to do. And so that basket of ideas is coming before council in the relatively near future.
Has the Miller Nash completed their development of the language necessary for correct code for the city council to then consider?
So they're almost finished with that review, but we were long enough to have a stake in the ground. I just don't remember what the date was. But yes, it did not go off into la la land and vanish. So, and we thank you for it.
Okay. Back to our agenda. That brings us to new business and discussion on public outreach. So Emily, do you want to come over here? Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all for having me. My name is Emily Salisbury. I'm the City of Newburgh's graphic design specialist, my official title, but I work in community engagement as a whole. I'm a team of one. Uh, let's see, my next slide here. I'm a team of one. I work with very closely with our admin team at the city. So that's the city manager over there, city recorder and her assistant. But I also work in a very collaborative role with a lot of departments. So I really love community engagement, and I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what it is and the scope of it, because it's a lot of things. And I think the education piece is the big one for you guys. And hopefully education for prevention of traffic issues. But it's all kinds of things. It's partnering with the community to get information out to people in a lot of different ways. So we'll talk about some of those. I really liked this infographic because it shows the different places that community engagement takes in community, and sort of the preparatory role and influential role that engaging the community takes. This is a specific infographic with examples from urban planning, which sort of has some overlap with you guys. Generally speaking, though, it allows sort of the involvement and two-way education between the city and the community. So, like I said, I'm a team of one, but I do a lot in the city. So I am always talking to different departments and trying to learn from them and communicate between the community and be a bridge between the city and the community. So I actually work for the city. I also work for the Newburgh Downtown Coalition. I sort of moonlight for them as a social media coordinator and a event helper. And I talk to a lot of people in the city, especially in sort of the downtown core. And I live here in Newburgh. So I love to talk to people and hear their stories and hear their complaints. I like to hear their complaints because that's an actionable thing that we can do to help. So I do a bunch of different things. I do graphic design, that's my big one. But I also proofread for departments. I do photography. I write press releases. I produce documents and much more. So for you guys specifically, there's a few different resources out there that I am currently using in sort of national channels and local ones. So National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, NHTSA, puts out a calendar every year of social media specific outreach options, sort of monthly things. So like Officer Hagan mentioned, Distracted Driving Awareness Month is one that ODOT does, but NHTSA also does a lot of other really great initiatives, and they produce social media graphics and resources for for cities like ours that have sort of a small scrappy admin team to be able to get information out to people. FEMA is another one. They have ready.gov. They're more emergency preparedness focused, but still important. So these are a couple that I'll talk a little bit about here. So I try to check these frequently. ODOT is one. I try to talk to them about their upcoming projects, but sometimes it's hard to figure out who the project liaison is. So, you know, the bypass, for instance, I have a connect there. Haven't heard a lot about it lately, but and the UDV project that Jenna was just here talking about, that's something that we produced a couple of different outreach initiatives to the community, especially downtown Newburgh and people that live around there, so that they could take that survey and let us know their local experience. And as I mentioned, NHTSA has a couple of different things that kind of cover a broad swath of traffic safety. Yeah.
Big question. When the ODOT person was here, she was commenting about how many more comments they received from Newburgh than they did from Cottage Grove.
Yeah.
Do you Why, do you have any idea why that's?
I mean, I
Happening.
would love to attribute that entirely to myself, but, uh, a little bit of what I did for that, we put out a press release from the city to, the Newburgh Graphic. So that went out in the newspaper, and also a local, news source, Newsburgh, that's becoming a more, popular social media resource. I also created, they sent over resources and their info sheet, but I created a graphic to just make it a little bit more digestible and easy to figure out what was going on. And put that out on social media and pushed it a couple of times, and they did an extension on that, so we pushed that again. And another thing I did was I went to Chehalem Valley Chamber of Commerce does a greeters event every Friday morning, where they go to a different location of a local business that talks about what they do. But then also other people in the city can talk about what they do. So even Dundee, sometimes McMinnville people show up, anyone sort of in the valley can show up. And so I handed out flyers at that event, just to get those people, because I was like, how many of you drive on 99 in downtown Newburgh? All of them. So they all took that and scanned a QR code and hopefully took the survey, because it didn't take too long to do. So I was just encouraging them to do that. But I suspect that some of those were part of the reason. I will say 130 out of over 25,000 in Newburgh is a pretty small number. And I know, I'm pretty sure Cottage Grove is smaller. So statistically, it still is a really good number. That's a lot of data for something like this that has such a short sort of window for people to respond. But so I did a bunch of things. Yeah. So some resources just from my experience and talking to other people that sort of coordinate similar things to me. I will sort of disclaim that some outreach opportunities are funding prohibited. And that would be something that we would coordinate with different city departments to figure out what we can do. So a lot of community outreach options that we might discuss would probably come through Brett, and then engineering and I, or planning and I, or whoever is the point person on a campaign would discuss that and figure out what we want to do, where that funding comes from. Do we want posters? Do we need to print something? But most things are free. So for instance, social media, like I mentioned, there's a lot of resources out there to share. But I am trying very hard to be put on the main show on social media, not just commercials. So it is free. It doesn't reach everybody. It's at the whim of the algorithm. And people tend to scroll past things that just tell them what to do. So I really try to create engaging content where people can say, I can connect with that. I know that location. That's a photo of somewhere where I live. And use stories to really hook people and get them in. So I like to use the free resources because they're low effort, but not always the most effective. And then something that we found fairly effective has been just meeting people where they're going to see something. A big challenge that I talk about with people is getting people to read things. But some people do, like if you're waiting in line for a bathroom or you're at the laundromat or something, you might see an eye-catching flyer and read about a city initiative or an open house or something. So walking around to downtown businesses to put up flyers for something, or sending information out through the Chamber of Commerce's email threads, or posting something at the library or the post office, at the Wednesday market, just being places that people already are. It's kind of the anti-social media. So trying to diversify. Another thing that we can do to shoot things directly into people's email boxes is putting links into our utility billing email if people do a paperless option. Or putting a really short message on the printed bill if they get if they get that. That's something that we've been looking into more because we updated our utility bill emailing system and we can now customize a little bit more. The mailers are sort of that cost prohibited option. So that's something that the city manager approves the content of the mailer, and then we get information from our GIS guys to get addresses. So if you were looking at a specific intersection or something and you wanted to survey people or something like that, without having to actually go to their houses and talk to them, that would be one way to do it. And then, as I mentioned, press releases are a great option. We have our kind of two main news resources here. And obviously I'm not going to be sending out 2,700 and 6,000 out to different journalists in the area, but occasionally we might reach out to the Oregonian with a press release. The main problem, like I said, is getting people to actually look at things. And thankfully, our journalists in the area are good at communicating with me. So if I send something to them, they'll usually publish it. So they don't have to be for something that's super urgent or like something that people have to engage with. They can just be like, hey, it's Distracted Driving Awareness Month. Did you know? And even including local data that we could grab from public safety or that we could grab from ODOT. So things like that are an option that we could brainstorm about. And then a big thing about Newburgh is that we are a word of mouth town. People talk and word gets around. And so I really love doing open houses and community forums. I think that they're a really great way to find out who the people that really care about something are, because if they really care and they can come, then they will make an effort to come to an open house, especially if we make it really accessible and really friendly. Hosting at the library or the cultural center, obviously not City Hall right now, unfortunately, but hosting it somewhere local that they can connect with people. And you get to know the people that are sort of frequent flyers and sort of frequent complainers, but sometimes that's a good thing because you can talk to them and connect with them and maybe find resources that they have that they can help us. So that's it. I would love to hear any questions that you all have or ideas. You know, putting out as many sets of eyeballs as I can and as many sets of ears as I can for people who see really great traffic safety campaigns and might want to replicate something similar, I think is a really great option. So, you know, any communication about collaboration that we can do can come through Brett, or if you want to have me back at some point and talk about something, that's fine too. But I would love questions if you have them.
So the commission members have heard me say that I worked all my professional career in California. So forgive me up front for that. But a specific reason I bring it up right now is that ODOT's counterpart, Caltrans, had a specific statewide office called the Office of Traffic Safety.
Yeah.
And I simply don't know whether or not ODOT has the equivalent. But if they do, that I would recommend is likely a good resource.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they're developing, in that example, they're developing state level campaigns and marketing materials and stuff that I think would be helpful if it exists here.
Yeah, I don't know. And Officer Hagan, are you aware of anything like that? Local Oregon traffic safety?
Other than the publications that you mentioned with the NHTSA and the ODOT, who they put their flyers and their mailers out and then they share them with local law enforcement. Other than that, I'm not.
I would think if it's configured the same, it would be an office within ODOT. Maybe you're already tapped in to the right places. So, yeah.
The only thing I'm aware of in that regard is the Oregon Impact. They put out some kind of, but it's kind of that educational component of that.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of the of an organization with NODOT that is kind of that
Yeah,
like you're
that
describing
sounds
with
very
Caltrans.
likely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that came to my mind, you mentioned briefly Dundee and McMinnville, and it reminds me that even being new here, it's something I'm quickly learning is that the various communities in the immediate vicinity are very interconnected. And do you have connections with your counterparts in in nearby cities? And, Yamhill County was mentioned. And I know, for example, I was fortunate to hear about and attend something that Marion County hosted in St. Paul that talked about work they were going to do on McKay Road, because I go that direction a lot. So I was interested. But, having this information flowing in all directions to our neighboring agencies, I think is another productive flow of information if it's possible.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Things like, things that affect 99 especially. But a lot of people sort of cross communities just because they live one place and they work in another. Brandon being an example of that, I believe. But yes, so I am connected with Dundee, but I am seeking connection in other cities all the time. So yes, and I'm connected with like CPRD and a couple of other more local ones, but I'm always branching out as much as I can. So that is another thing that I will look into, because I think that would be really valuable to get some of those resources out and make sure people are cross-posting and getting as many eyes on them.
Other feedback for Emily? Yes, go ahead.
Are signboards effective? I mean, announcing things, for example, the survey.
I don't have any data to say one way or the other. If they are, I think it's always dependent on location and what the messaging is. I think something like the survey that we were just discussing, that Jenna was just sort of talking about, would be a little bit complicated to do something like that with. And I'm not sure that there's many locations within Newburgh that we could do something like that. I do know that Lewis Audio and Video has a signboard that they use to support certain local events and things like that. So that is always an option. He's quite connected with different downtown boards and things. So
In Sherwood, if you go towards Sherwood on 99, there's an insurance agent or whatever there that has a big
yeah, that
board
big
that
one.
always.
Yes. Yeah, certainly.
Thank you so much. I think you are amazing that you're getting so much done. Like, I'm very impressed. I personally would love to be on a mailing list, but like the auto pay utilities, like I would not see that. And I think it would be free. Maybe that could be something that you could offer to the community is a lower cost option, because I know you can have that data too of how many people are opening and reading those emails. So I don't know if that's something you'd consider. I'm not here to necessarily tell you how to do your job, but here I am doing it. So yeah, thank you for your
Totally. So a couple of things about that. One thing I didn't mention is that there are a lot of people subscribed to the Newburgh Public Library newsletter. So that is a place that we have messaged occasionally. Obviously, we try to keep that as library specific as possible, but sometimes when we really want to get messages out to the community at large, that is a really good one. And that is also sort of cross community because we're pulling in Dundee residents. Some of you may know, some of you may not, we are getting a new city website. So that is another big project I've been working on. And that will have some sort of newsletter messaging options like you're talking about. Newsletters are something I'm really interested in, but I'm sort of analyzing the amount of time that takes to put together versus the benefit of it in our community and whether that would be good for people. I think it would, considering the library newsletter, but you do start to get that sort of email fatigue where people see your newsletter come through and they stop looking at it after a while. So something I've been looking at and analyzing and just sort of figuring out the best way to do it. But I do appreciate that.
Thank you. So obviously, we're not here to tell you to do, how to do your job or anything. What I recommend is maybe once a quarter, how we get this, the updates for the police and engineering, maybe just some outreach you've done and maybe impressions that they've got, just so we can kind of see. I know, city manager does that for city council.
Mhm.
Maybe just some initiatives you've done and we can just say, hey, cool, thanks for it, or how does this work?
Yeah.
I think we're kind of spending too much time on telling people how to do their job and whatnot. So just want to make sure we're on the same path we should be going on.
No, it's really good. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to talk to a commission face to face about something like this. So it's new territory for me in coordinating, getting that information to you and knowing what I'm doing behind the scenes. But doing traffic safety messaging is something that I sort of added to my list a while ago. So it's something I try to do every month. And it would be really easy to pull impression data and everything. I already do that for Will, like you said, for community engagement. So I could just bring you a little bit more detailed data and any feedback that we're getting and things like that as a really short report, if you guys would like that, but definitely.
I would say though, obviously fairly obvious point for a city this size to not have any policy analysts, to have only one person who's a graphic designer and a PIO. We are extraordinarily understaffed. So I would recommend that Emily provides data, but does not necessarily add all the late night meetings to her list.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, that could look like me handing data to Brett that he could then present to you. That would be super easy because that could just be a couple of slides in your presentation that you can talk about. And you know, I don't mind coming to meetings, but Will is right, you know. I'm doing a lot. So it's definitely something we can look at. And I'm already producing that data. So it would just be a matter of coordinating, getting it to you.
Could just be dropped into our staff reports in our
Totally.
package.
Mhm.
Okay, good discussion. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. We'll look forward to working with you. Next on our agenda says commissioner comments. Do any of us have any comments as yet unexpressed? Yes, sir.
So I'm not really sure how the process works, but I had
I hope you're not
council-
expecting me to know.
no. So I had a counselor reach out to me about if we were wanting to put crosswalks someplace. Is it my responsibility, I guess, to talk to the chairman of this committee or Brett? Okay, then I'll talk with you about the idea then.
Brett, thanks for volunteering.
Yeah, I'll just share related to that. For all types of things, we have a parking policy, a crosswalk or a guidance and thing that's on the Traffic Safety Commission webpage. So there's some documents that have been identified for where things should go, what the process is to identify those. But yeah, definitely you can reach out to me and send me an email. I can walk you through the process. We have a process that's out there that's to follow to kind of give consistency to where things should or should not be placed. So.
Any other commissioner comments? Okay, there's some items listed for reference information. I think that's just information out to us. And hearing no objection, I think we're ready to adjourn. Our next meeting will be July 8th at 6 p.m. right here. Yes? Okay, we'll see you all then. Thanks, everybody.